Good afternoon. As David said, my name is Craig Haney. I run the Corporate Innovation Program at Communitech in Waterloo. My job is essentially to help the big companies connect into the small companies. Really happy to be here today. Really looking forward to talking to you a little bit about some corporate innovation folks about how do we make big companies act a little bit more like small companies. But most importantly, I think I'm going to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship. So how do we create the crazy shit disturbers inside large organizations to actually help move some of these things around? Okay, let's get started. So we talk about Moore's Law. Moore's Law states that technology doubles in capacity and costs are cut in half every 18 months. Well, what does that mean? It means that, and I typically do a talk like this in front of big company corporate executives who have just spent $10 million on an SAP implementation and look at me when I say the software that the folks at the University of Waterloo Velocity program are using is better than the stuff you just spent $10 million on, and it's free. And they know how to use it, and they know how to deliver value out of it much cheaper and faster than what you just spent your money on. What's really fascinating about that is that those that understand this law, that understand how the rules of engagement and the rules of technology are changing, have an advantage. And they have an unfair advantage in many ways because they take technology and they can leverage it. A great example for those that have read the Exponential Organizations. There's a great story about Ray Kurzweil, who's a fellow at Google. And he talks about the fact when they were mapping the human genome that it took about 50% of the budget and about 50% of the time that they expected to map the human genome. And then they only had 1% of the human genome mapped. And they were 50% spent of the money. And all the other engineers and technologists were saying, wow, you better stop this. You're wasting our money. We're only going to get to 2% or even 5%. By the time we run out of time, money, and people. And Ray Kurzweil said, we're right on time. Because Moore's Law will state that things will get double as fast and cheaper, and we'll get there. And sure enough, they were a year ahead of schedule and under budget by the time they actually mapped the human genome. Maybe a little more relevant example, 1956, this was an autonomous vehicle ad by General Motors. I don't know how many people saw Teslas driving down when you were on the bus today on the 401. But the idea of an autonomous vehicle is not new. But the capabilities to actually get it there and actually do something with it weren't there until now, where you take a look at it, we see autonomous vehicles all the time, just no one knows how to play Scrabble anymore. If you noticed on the previous one, they were actually playing Scrabble in the car. That's the real joke. No one knows how to play Scrabble anymore. But now we can put stuff that used to be in space shuttles 30 years ago, we can put in a $30,000 car. I mean, that's Moore's Law in action, and it's changing the game. Also, every good technology presentation has to have Star Trek, and I think so far almost everyone has had something to do with Star Trek while we're here. This is an actual tricorder in 1966, and Spock had it. And for those that don't know, and I'm speaking to an audience that probably does, the tricorder measured the environment, whether that's your own personal environment with your health, or whether that's the planet that you're invading to keep the aliens away. Spock knew what the hell was happening within his environment. Fast forward now, this is Dr. Sunny Coley out of Oakville. Cloud DX has now invented the tricorder and is part of this Qualcomm X Prize of $10 million to the first organization or person who develops an actual tricorder. Once again, what's funny, what's the virus, is that tricorder there that he has looks a lot like that one that Spock has. So the idea isn't hard, it's just that the technology is changing so fast. And so what's exciting is everything is happening so fast, and it's coming, and you have no choice but to get on the train or get run over by it, because it is coming. I'm part of an organization called Communitech. We're a not-for-profit based out of Kitchener-Waterloo. We have a wonderful technology hub in downtown Kitchener at the Tannery Building, and then a new data hub in uptown Waterloo. And we're a not-for-profit, so we're 20 years old. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary a few weeks ago. And our job is to help technology companies start, grow, and succeed. So the University of Waterloo Velocity program is based out of the Tannery Building. There's about 100 companies there, right from early stage ideas, validation, right through to commercialization, where they've got 15 or 20 people sort of building really cool stuff and selling to real customers. Some of the biggest exits we've seen out of that program are Kik, Thalmic, Vidyard, and many, many others. But those would certainly be the ones that we'd be most familiar with. Most recently, what we've been doing is getting in this idea of corporate innovation. And where it came from was that Canadian Tire, for all its glory, had a really good idea that they needed to get faster and smarter, and they wanted to be and they wanted startups to help them. So Canadian Tire built this great innovation lab in Communitech, just a couple of folks, and the job of the innovation center there for Canadian Tire was really to connect to startups and do some really interesting things. I happened to run that lab for the first few years of its existence. And really what was exciting is that all the other companies, all the big companies would come in, and it would be a Manulife, and it would be a TD Bank, and it would be a Fairfax Financial and General Motors, and they would go, what the hell's Canadian Tire doing here? And what's neat is that after about a minute and a half elevator pitch of why Canadian Tire was there, almost every single one said, I get it. I need to be here too, because the world is changing so fast, and we can't do it as an organization. So I get to talk a little bit about how Canadian Tire, but most likely how other organizations and you as students, most importantly, can play this game and to help challenge the way big companies operate moving forward. So let's talk a little bit about what a big company is. For all intents and purposes, a big company is a company that knows how to do one thing, which is make money, and it does it very, very well. And it usually does it through an established business model that it's been doing for a long time. They have wonderful things like scale, like customers, like channel, like brands, like partners, everything a startup would dream of, right? When you think about a startup, how it raises money, it raises tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars to build the technology and prototype and kind of get that early stage customer. But it raises hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars to actually scale this. This is what the big companies do really, really well. They scale things, but they just don't move very fast. So let's talk about what a startup is. In our world, what a startup is a temporary organization in search of that business model. It's this idea that we're out there trying and iterating and failing and getting in front of the customer and building really cool stuff and hoping by God someone buys it. And if they buy it, then 2 people buy it, then 4, then 8, then 16, and then away you go. And what they're really good at, they're good at experimenting, they're good at testing, and they're focused on innovation, and they're focused on their customer problems, because that's how they build their business, is by selling real things to real people and delivering value out of that. And what we've learned over this time, that a startup is not just a small, big company. They're fundamentally different, and a big company is never going to be a big startup, right? So we have to find ways to bring these organizations together in relevant ways to benefit from both of those. So in this case, when we talk about it, an entrepreneur is not necessarily the same as an intrapreneur. And for those that don't know, we'll go into a quick description here. What is an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur is that initiator. It's that person who's willing to challenge the status quo, and usually is that person who's willing to do things that very few other people are willing to do, right? They're passionate, they're risk takers, they're catalysts, they're starters, they're dreamers. They're the people that often will take the risk that many other people want to do, but aren't willing to do the hard work and the challenge to do it. And they go out and do it. But what's an intrapreneur, right? An intrapreneur is someone inside a large organization who acts a little bit like an entrepreneur, but has a little bit less crazy and a little more political savvy to kind of get through some of that organization. So they're still good at experimenting, but they're probably much better at communicating. They're learning from failures, but they're able to take that failures and say, you know what? Maybe we need to think about lessons learned versus just the crazy failure stuff that we did. And they're usually willing to push boundaries, but within the context of a political organization. So as we go through this next little while, think about that difference between an entrepreneur and an intrapreneur, and how you can play that role in this as you build your career out here, and see how you can provide value for our largest organizations. You guys are well aware of this, but I just want to put a little bit of context of some of the trends that are out there in the world that our big companies, our big organizations are aware of, but I don't think they understand the implications of that. And I think this is your chance as entrepreneurs to really enable something new in some of these big organizations. Number one is just this connection. Everything is going to be connected. We're going from thousands of sensors to millions of sensors to billions and trillions of sensors. And what's really interesting with this is Moore's Law in action as we speak. If we think about some of the way that we censored organizations, a good example is when Nokia buys a UK company to watch traffic patterns by embedding sensors in the roads. They spent $8 billion to buy that company that was embedding sensors in the roads. They wanted to understand traffic data. Waze, for those, anyone use Waze here? Awesome, and those Drive in Toronto uses Waze. It'll save your life and hours upon it. Waze says, I don't need to build sensors because I've got one in every single user's pocket. And what if I ask them to share their traffic data? And what if I ask them to share their GPS data? How quickly could I do that? So Waze, over the next few years, builds critical mass of cell phone users and smartphone users around the world that start sharing their data to then crowdsource what the best traffic patterns are in the world. Fast forward a few years, Google buys Waze for $1 billion, integrates it into Google Maps, and now you've got real-time traffic efforts constantly growing as more users figure out that Waze is really a game changer on technology. And where's Nokia today? It's really interesting how we look at data and how fast, when you buy legacy systems and legacy ways versus leveraging the things that are in people's pockets, and how to do that much faster. There are so many ways to do this much faster and quicker, and I think you guys are at the cusp of helping our largest organizations figure this out. Number two is machine learning and just the ability of cloud computing and to compute all of this data. So if the sensors are collecting data, if we go from thousands to millions to trillions of sensors, we're collecting just that much more data. And that's going to go up in an exponential way. If we don't have the computing power to manage this, then we're not going to make sense of that. And for those that have the idea, there's a wonderful pyramid that talks about data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. Right now, the data set is collecting that idea, or the sensor data is collecting the data. Sensor system is collecting the data. We're now here able to take that data and make it knowledge, and hopefully ultimately information, then knowledge, and ultimately wisdom, which allows you to see the future. The story I tell about this was a couple years ago. I was in Brazil, and I turned on my phone when I landed, and I was in the bus and connected to the Wi-Fi. I'm like, well, how long am I to my hotel? I'm trying to figure out, I'm in Sao Paulo. I've never been here before. I had a 10-hour flight, and I'm a little groggy. And I open up my phone in Google Maps, and Google says, Craig, welcome to Sao Paulo. You're 25 minutes away from your hotel. Here's your hotel reservation, and here's where your conference is, and here's your registration code for your conference that starts tomorrow. And I'm like, holy shit, that's creepy. But then I realized that's what I was going to ask it anyways. That's what saw the future. And it's machine learning. It's that ability to collect all of that information and actually do something with it that creates value for me as a user. And the funny thing is that's all free. I'm not worrying about how they monetize that, because at some point they are, and it's going to cost me my own privacy at some point. But right now, at that point, it provided me value. So it's in a barter system. And the third thing is this around cloud. This goes back to this idea of server farms and networks. And we as large organizations, used to have to build these $50 million server farms to manage this data. And by the time you would take 2 years to actually get the approval and build these systems, they were obsolete, because Moore's law states technology doubles in capacity and costs are cut in half every 18 months. So when you use the cloud, someone else does that for you. All you have to do is pay license fees. All you have to do is someone else. But someone else takes advantage of that and has to figure that out. And our largest organizations are just coming along to this idea of leveraging the cloud to do so much more than just store our data. It's actually doing that computing in the cloud and doing some really interesting things. So your job as entrepreneurs, if you're not necessarily the entrepreneurial minded or collected, is to figure out how to do this for big companies in ways that they can't think about themselves, because they're buried in this way of the way things have been done in the past. So in the startups are all in on the technology. They're all in on the entrepreneurial and creating the shit and moving fast, and it's wonderful. What's great is the corporates have the business problems that you're solving. So if you can bring that entrepreneurial mindset inside the organization and really help to foster and accelerate some of those ideas, but within a larger corporate context, you really have an opportunity to make a difference in billion-dollar companies. So what we like to call these types of companies are nimble hippo companies. Right? So this idea that they're agile, that they're fast, yet they move at scale, that they're smart. You know, they leverage the channels, the partners, the brands that I talked about before, but they're willing to ask questions of the things that they don't know before. They're willing to say, I don't know things I don't know, and I want the young folks in my organization to actually help me do this stuff. They're curious, and I think this is the hardest thing for any big organization to do, is to be curious. I've got young kids, sorry, and it's not my first presentation, I slapped my microphone. I've got young kids, and when you've got a 3- and 4-year-old kid, and when they keep asking, why? And at some point you're a parent, you're like, just shut up, it's because, right? But you realize that that's a missing link for us. We just assume so much that the things that they say are true. We need to ask more questions, and big corporates don't ask enough questions. And we need more young people to start asking questions why they do things, and then have enough ability and space in your job to go fix that, and to go and to take those why answers and to go do something with them. They look to partner. So they partner with companies like Communitech and Mars and DMZ and others in this wonderful country to say, how do we learn from the startups? How do we learn from the colleges and universities and the people that don't look like us and smell like us, so that we can learn from them? And finally, they need to be cool, because you know what? There's a war for talent out there. It's why the companies are out recruiting for startups or for internships and co-op programs for the best and the brightest. And I think there are two things apart this. One is the talent magnet to get folks like you and others to apply for jobs in banks that typically you would think are boring. Right? I don't want to go work for a bank. I work for Canadian Tire, and any of those who've gone to do a product lookup in Canadian Tire not that long ago remember the green screens that they had in the store. And you would think, as a software developer or a computer science or an engineer, why would you ever want to work for a company like that? But the coolest thing is that 93% of Canadians live within a 15-minute drive of a Canadian Tire. If you can actually build really cool shit that changes the customer experience, and we heard Mark talk about the bricks and mortar retail challenges earlier, you can change a lot of people's worlds. And you can see that. And you know, the other really cool thing, when I got my job at Canadian Tire, my dad was so proud of me. It's the first company he'd ever actually heard of before that I worked for. So it made him very proud that he could actually tell his friends who I actually worked for. That's a really cool experience, to be able to say, I can change something within a brand or an experience that people have every day. And I think that idea of entrepreneurship really fosters that. So we need more companies to think this way. And that's really what I spend most of my time doing. The other part that we talk about is speed. So we've heard about speed a lot today. And historically, big companies used to use the idea of channels and brands as their competitive advantage, as their walled garden. Technology companies use intellectual property as their walled garden. But any of those that have dealt with IP knows that your intellectual property is only good as your ability to defend it. So if you can get out there and actually deliver real value to your customers faster, cheaper, and better, then you'll have a chance to win the world. And for big companies, this is a challenge, and they're always looking for great people to do this for them. And also, there's no shortage of ideas. There's no shortage of things to fix big companies. If you go to a bank, if you go to your classrooms, you take a look at the education system today, there's no shortage of things that you want to fix, right? But how does the organizations, do the universities, do the big companies actually have the discipline and the patience to actually go through with this and fix it? Because the ideas are great, the ideas are a dime a dozen, but if the big companies don't know how to actually deliver this in a meaningful way, then we're all going to lose. And I think it's our chance as entrepreneurs to be able to do this for some of our most established organizations before they become irrelevant. But it's more than just space. This is a great space at Communitech. It got swinging chairs from the roof, and we got really cool cushions and couches, but innovation is not about that. Innovation is about delivering really cool, important, valuable things at scale to make millions of dollars. If you're not doing innovation that makes you millions of dollars, then it's not worth doing, especially if you're a billion-dollar organization. This has to move the needle on your revenue, and it's hard, but it takes people on the inside that are really willing to push the boundaries and play by a bit of a different set of rules to be able to do this. So we take a look at some frameworks to do this well. One of these is McKinsey's 3 horizons. We talk about Horizon 1 as being the things that you can do today to help the company. So this is like Lean Six Sigma and incremental innovation. Do the things you do today, just deliver them better. Better supply chain, better programs. Horizon 2 is about delivering things over the next 18 to 36 months. These are things that are really hard to do, but you need to do them within a timeline. And then number 3, or Horizon 3, is really around the disruption side. So what does the future look like? What is your R&D efforts in large organizations? And this is the fun stuff. This is the stuff that the CEO talks about and says, look at all the cool, crazy stuff that we have doing, and it's great. But if you don't actually do the Horizon 2 stuff and deliver this into your organization, you need real technical people to deliver this, then you're not creating value, you're just creating theater. So we need more, we need a spectrum across that, and I'll go through. But no one ever gets fired for this because we focus on Horizon 1. This is the stuff that's easy to do, right? But as we build this, we need a portfolio of innovations. Oops, this is different. Okay, so why is this not enough? Sorry, why is this not enough? This is not enough because this gives you a sense of the lifespan of a company. So 60 years ago, the S&P 500 company, an average lifespan of that company was 65 years. So that means they stayed big for a long time. Where is it today? About 15, 17 years. So that means our big companies are not staying big. So all of that work that they're doing in Horizon 1 here about incremental innovation is clearly not enough. So what do we need to do? Here's another good example of why it's not enough. This is the camera industry. Take a look at this. This is a normal growth curve for analog cameras, film cameras from 1930 right through to about 2003, 2004, right? Typical growth curve, and then we had this inflection point right around the year 2000. What is that? Has point-and-click cameras, right? So the blue is all your digital point-and-click cameras, your green is your DSLRs, and your red stuff is the cool mirrorless cameras. So if I'm a Nikon or a Fuji and I say, wow, look at this market, I could triple my market. All I got to do is spend 5 or 7 years retooling my team, retooling my manufacturing, figuring out what this digital thing is. And if you're Kodak, you invented the digital camera, but you can't figure out how to monetize it. And then there's this another inflection point really quickly because what the problem is here is that it took 5 or 7 years to retool the company, and your lifespan, your growth is only 10 or 12 years, so you're only actually harvesting for a few. So you don't make enough money at this. This is really hard. Then there's this last one here, the smartphone industry. And you're like, well, this is interesting, and that's the scale. Why is that a challenge? Because companies saw their market as cameras, but customers saw it as pictures. Customers didn't care what took the picture. They just wanted the pictures. Camera companies said, well, you need to use a camera for it. And people said, well, yeah, but I have my smartphone that's got a camera on it. Yeah, it's only 1 megapixel today, but Moore's Law states that that's going to get 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 32 in the next 7 years. I'm going to buy on that. And we've seen that they have. So why do we need entrepreneurship? We need to continue to build new businesses. We need somehow to support the crazy people. We need to create trends. We need to push boundaries. And to be honest, not everyone's a good employee, right? And that's okay. Not everyone needs to be like that. But why do we need entrepreneurship? We need this idea of balance. We need the big, we need the smart, we need the nimble people. The entrepreneurs are driving the future of business, of our existing business today, and allowing them to stay relevant and important as long as possible, and able to speak the status quo or speak the language of the startups. You need to take advantage of those trends. So our big companies, if you think about the managers that are running our big companies, they've typically grown up in that organization for 20 or 30 years. How are they supposed to understand how to be successful in a world that's changing so fast today when they've been successful in doing things the way it's always been done? So we need our entrepreneurs to shake that up. And finally, they need to continually challenge the status quo. They need to push the way things are done and need to challenge the way that it's always been done before, and they need space and freedom to do that. A couple of really quick lessons here. This is Jim Balsley from talking about the iPhone back in the RIM days. It's just another cell phone. It's already crowded. There's lots of other cell phones on here. I'm not too worried about the iPhone. I guess he should have been. Number 2, this is a more recent one. This is Amazon. So this is FedEx, VP of Logistics at FedEx, talking about the fact that Amazon wants to start leasing its own trucks and planes to build its own logistics company. And FedEx is saying, there's already 3 big ones. There's Purolator, there's DHL, and there's FedEx. Why do you think Amazon can do it? Right, they're already spending tens of billions of dollars to try to get to that way. Well, once again, we've learned lessons time and time again that technology doubles in capacity and costs are cut in half every 18 months. If FedEx thinks that Amazon is going to spend the same amount of money that they do, they're entirely wrong, because Amazon knows technology better than they do. And I don't know about you, but I'm not betting against Jeff Bezos anytime soon. So a few questions before I just sort of lock up today. So based on what you've heard and what you think, what are some of the experiences that don't match the trends? So if you think about your day at school or your shopping experiences or the experiences you have in anything else, what sort of things that you do today that you shake your head at and said, that doesn't match the way the world's going? There's an inflection point there. And I'll give you a chance just a second. Number 2 is, what are some of the jobs that could disappear in 5, 10, 15 years? Right? There's lots of them out there. And finally, what trends excite you the most but also scare you the most? These are some of the great things that you want to take advantage of as you kind of go out through your career. Can we take questions, or do we want to sort of finalize up? We can keep going. Okay. All right, just to finish up. Sorry, so what's next? What I need you guys to do is to be curious, ask questions, talk to a lot of people. Test your assumptions of the world. Right? There's so many things we assume to be true. We want to test those assumptions. Follow the trends that are there, but find those inflection points where your experiences don't match the trends. Excuse me, that's your opportunity to create disruption in the world and build really cool shit that you can make millions of dollars with, whether that's inside the company or not. Be a problem finder and a solution and a problem solver. So not only find the problems, but try to go solve them yourself. Do meaningful things. I think this is also, find your passion. You got Larry Smith here talking later, which is a brilliant man talking about the passions. Find things that are meaningful for you, because that'll give you the duration and the longevity to execute. And finally, be awesome. People talk a lot about finding their dream job, and I talk to a lot of students over my days about what the dream job is, how do you do your career, whatever that is. Just be awesome at what you're doing today, and that will give you the space to do the things that you truly love to do and can make an impact in later on. So, my name's Craig Haney. Thank you very much for listening. I'm going to pass it off to the next folks. So, thank you very much.